everyone. Welcome. My name is Paige. I'm at Deschutes Public Library, and we are here tonight as part of Deschutes Public Library's virtual programming. I am joined tonight by a community librarian from DPL. This is Jenny Pedersen. She will be going through some of the great, wonderful free web resources that we have available for you through the library. But before I turn it over to her, I'm going to take a couple minutes here to tell you about why we're all here. The library hosts free programming every month for adults based on a theme. And we right now are exploring the theme of justice. What does justice mean to you? And how can you get access to justice in your community? This is a topic that's near and dear to Jenny's heart because she is a community librarian who focuses on legal services. Jenny has worked for Deschutes Public Library in a variety of roles since 2008 and has overseen the law library since 2018. Prior to working in libraries, she worked as a researcher at newspapers and television news stations in Canada, England, and the US. She can't believe she waited so long to make the transition to libraries, where she's able to help people one-on-one with their information needs and challenges, as well as talk endlessly about books. When not working, Jenny enjoys reading, horseback riding, cross-country skiing, hiking, and of course, books. So thank you so much for being here tonight, Jenny. I'm going to turn it over to you to take it away.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Paige. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm excited to share DPL's legal resources, and I'm just going to pull up a PowerPoint. So let's see if this works. So hello, everybody. Thanks for watching this video. And welcome to the Law Library. Did you know that Deschutes Public Library serves as the county's law library? We do. And in this presentation, I'm going to share a brief history on how DPL came to oversee the county's law library, what that means, and give you an overview of our legal resources and services. So way back in 1907, the Oregon legislature passed a law mandating that each county in Oregon maintain a public law library. These law libraries would be funded by court filing fees, and that remains the same to this day, though now those fees are split between law library services and mediation services. In 2011, that statute was updated to allow for an outside organization to run the county's law library, an organization other than the county. At that time, the Deschutes County Law Library was housed in that little triangle building down by the County Services building on Wall Street near Olney. It was staffed by a solo librarian. It was open to the public 20 hours a week. And lawyers and judges could get their own key and access it whenever they wanted to. When that librarian retired, it was somewhere around 2013 or 2014, Deschutes County commissioners decided they didn't really want to run a library anymore. And they approached DPL's director to see if we wanted to do it since we were already in the business of running libraries. And in 2015, an agreement was signed and DPL took over law library services for the county. That change immediately tripled open hours for the public, although judges and lawyers did lose their special access. And it also increased staffing support for the law library. We now have one librarian who oversees law library services. Currently, that is myself. I have two public services specialists, so two of our desk staff who help me with law library services. And then we also have the support of our web and IT teams, as well as our collections, acquisitions, and cataloging teams. So there's a lot more involvement in the law library now. Fun fact, DPL is not the first public law library to run its county's law library. That distinction, I believe, is held by Tillamook County, and then Klamath County has housed their law library for quite a while. Since DPL took over our county law library, Crook County and more recently Umatilla County have also contracted with their public libraries to run the law library. So as the law library, DPL provides specific resources, services, and programs to the community. I'm going to talk about each of those things. So we're going to talk about our collection, the services we provide, and the programs that we offer as well. In order to talk about the collection, you need to know a little bit about what makes up this thing we call the law. So there are 5 main primary or authoritative sources of law, and each of those 5 exists for both the state and the federal court systems. So there are actually 3 legal systems at play in Oregon. The federal system, you can see on the chart here, the country is divided up into 11 districts, and Oregon is part of the 9th district. Each state has its own state system. So we have an Oregon judicial system as well. And then there is also tribal law. For the purposes of this presentation, we're really just going to focus on the state and federal systems. So the 5 primary sources of law. The first is constitutions. We've all heard about the US Constitution. Well, each state has its own constitution too. The second is statutes and codes. These are the laws that are enacted by state and federal legislatures. This is what most people are thinking of when they ask, what is the law on a topic? But statutes alone give an incomplete picture of the law. You need to consider all 5 of these areas. The third is regulations, which are rules created by government agencies. So these are agencies that have been given authority by governments to create laws. So things like OSHA or the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries. Then we have case law. We could do an entire presentation just on case law. Essentially, it is the opinions of appeals court judges. So the most famous type of case law is that comes out of the US Supreme Court. But Oregon has its own Court of Appeals and its own Supreme Court as well. Essentially, what case law does is it decides how a statute or regulation or constitutional part of a constitution should be applied in specific situations. So case law isn't giving a judgment per se, but it is giving an interpretation of how the laws should be applied. It's a little confusing, but it's an important part of the legal system. And lastly, we have court rules, which lay out the operating rules for a court. So these can be things like how cases need to be filed, statutes of limitations, all the operations of a court. And then court records, which are any files generated during a court case. After the primary sources of law, we have what are called the secondary sources of law. Now, these have no authoritative weight, so judges don't need to consider these when they are making decisions. But what they do is they help explain the law. They range from the more difficult to materials that are written for general understanding. So we have restatements of the law, which are very high level discourses for legal scholars. We have treatises and explainers, which are used by lawyers who are getting an overview of a new area of law for them. Legal articles and law journals, again, these will sort of parse through areas of law. These materials are really interesting. These are publications written by lawyers for lawyers practicing in an area of law, which is why they're called practice materials. You're going to find a lot of, I'm going to say it again, practical information, sample forms, just really useful information for anybody who's going through a case. Then we have our self-help guides, which are written for the layperson. So for most people coming into a legal situation, you're not sure what's going on or how the law works, you're going to want to start with these self-help guides. It's going to easily explain what you need to know without a lot of the legalese. And then we have dictionaries and encyclopedias as well, which will do something similar as the self-help guides. So that's a lot of different parts of the law and pieces of the law that you need to research if you're going through a legal situation. Deschutes Public Library, as the law library, has access to primary and secondary sources of law for both the state and federal law in a variety of print and digital formats. Our physical collection is fairly small for a law library, but it is surprisingly broad. If you have a legal question, I encourage you to just search for the topic in our catalog, and I think you might be surprised by what you find. The bulk of the law library's physical collection is housed on the second floor at the Downtown Bend Library. Most items do circulate and float, just like most of our collection, which means you can place holds on them and pick them up at any library in Deschutes County. I do have a note here. Since the law library collection is funded by Deschutes County funds, not DPL's regular collection funds, checkouts and holds are limited to those people who have a Deschutes Public Library card. These materials aren't part of our sharing agreement with Crook and Jefferson County. They have their own law libraries. Jefferson and Crook residents can still access our physical materials and our databases, though, at our physical branch locations. The only items that don't check out or circulate or float to other branches are items that are part of a series. So a set where you've got multiple volumes, where you would need one volume or all the volumes in order to use that set. Those items can only be used at the Downtown Bend Library. You may have noticed we have limited space in our libraries, and legal collections can be vast. If you've ever seen Law and Order or any other legal show, you know, there are always shelves and shelves of legal books with the same binding. Those are case law reporters. There is no end to case law. Case law starts when a court is founded, and it just continues compiling from there. Sets of statutes and regulations are also large and updated frequently. We just do not have the physical space to house these collections. Thankfully, we are able to provide access to all sources of primary law through our digital resources. Our big legal databases are housed on the law library laptop. This laptop is kept at the second floor information desk at the Downtown Bend Library, and you can check it out with your Deschutes Public Library card for in-house use. You cannot take that laptop home. It has access to Lexis and Westlaw, which are the two big legal databases in the US. You can kind of think of them as the Coke and Pepsi of the legal database world. They do pretty much the same thing, but they each have their own recipe. You know, each company has its own search and its own editorials on how laws should be applied. Sort of like if you're doing any type of research online, you might use both Google and Bing to make sure you found everything that's out there. I would encourage people to use both because you might find something in one that you did not find in the other. That laptop also has a program called For the Record, and that's just a software that can play court recordings. So if you get a recording from the court and you don't have the software to play it, you can always come in and use that laptop. We have a variety of other digital resources that aren't as tied down as the Lexis and Westlaw, and their access is available at different branches and remotely, just depending on the resource itself. So Hein Online could be considered the Dr. Pepper in my earlier Coke and Pepsi analogy. It does provide access to case law and a citation service through FastCase. It's a little less robust than those of Lexis and Westlaw, but the really nice thing about it is available remotely. So you can log into that resource from home if you have the internet and your Deschutes Public Library card, and do your case law searching at home. It also provides a lot of secondary sources and is a great resource for legal journals and legal articles. They offer excellent overviews of different legal topics, along with comparisons of state laws by legal topic. Bar Books is a really important resource that we offer. It provides digital access, online remote access to the Oregon State Bar's publications. These are practice materials that are some of the most important materials that we own because they are written by Oregon lawyers about Oregon law. It's about the best resource you can get for Oregon state law. And you can now access those remotely from wherever you may be. You do need to get a digital access token. You can get that by calling the reference desk at the Downtown Bend Library. The number is 541-617-7080. The important thing to know with that resource is that digital access token lasts for 30 minutes after it's issued. So don't call until you're ready to log in. Your session can last longer. It's just that login period is half an hour and then it will expire and you'll have to get a new token. We also have access to the OJSN, the Oregon Judicial Case Information Network. This is the Oregon Judicial Department's internal database of case records. OJD has allowed us to provide access to customers at all of our library locations outside of Bend. In Bend, OJSN can be accessed at the Deschutes County Circuit Courthouse down on Bond Street. But OJD recognized that it was a hardship for people in our, pretty geographically large county to get into Bend to access those court records, especially on a day like today where it's, snowing all day long. You wouldn't want to drive from Lapine into Bend. So now you can access that at our library buildings. Along with the collection, we offer many services, including legal reference and programming to help people with your legal information needs. First of all, you do not need to memorize how to access all of those digital resources I just talked about, or even which houses what. Use our legal resources webpage on DPL's website. This page is a hub of legal information, including our resources, programs, local courts, legal forms, and Oregon self-help resources. I'm just going to try and do a tricky, see if I can link into that page from this presentation. I'm going to see if the Zoom will follow us. So bear with me here. Paige, did that follow or do I need to reshare?
Why don't you go ahead and reshare for us? We still see your law library.
Okay, let me do this. Share, please. Okay, can you see it now?
There we go.
Perfect. So this is DeschutesLibrary.org. It's our website. And let me go back actually. Tell me if this follows page. Or do you see the front page now of our website?
Yes.
Perfect. So from our website, DeschutesLibrary.org, you can click on Research and Learning in this menu tab bar that runs across the top of the page. And down here in beautiful alphabetical order, you will get to Legal. So it's just a one-stop shop for all of your local legal needs. You're going to see here at the beginning, under library resources, we just list out all of those online resources that I just quickly showed you. If you keep scrolling down, you're going to see some other tabs. So the court information, referrals to other local organizations that might help with your legal issues, legal forms, which is always a really popular request that we get, local statutes and codes, as well as state and federal. And then this is really one of my favorite parts, the self-help guides. I'm going to tell you, this is just a quick little legal reference tip. If you have a legal issue and you're not sure where to start, Oregon Law Help and the Oregon State Bar Association Legal Information for the Public offer fabulous articles and overviews for the layperson. And again, these are written by Oregon lawyers about Oregon law. It doesn't get much better than that. Okay, I'm going to stop this share. I'm going to go back to the presentation. Let's see how nimble I can be. Okay. All right, are we back at the presentation?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to do that one more time. So we also help with legal reference, right?
Hey,
so if you have a
Jenny?
legal, oh yeah,
We are seeing presenter view. If you wanted to change your
okay.
display settings at the top.
Let me stop my share because I think I have another screen.
Yes,
Are you
there you go. Yep.
Okay, hold
Perfect.
on one.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Are you still just seeing my slide?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we can also help with your legal reference, right? Just like we provide reference at our in our libraries and through email and phone, we can help you with legal information needs as well. This is where I have to give my big disclaimer. DPL staff are not lawyers, not even me. I'm a librarian. We can't give you legal advice, which includes telling you which laws apply to your situation, which includes telling you which legal form you need. But what we can do is we're really good at helping you find the information, resources, and other organizations that can help answer your question or serve your need. We tend to see similar kinds of questions a lot, which prompted us to create some topics lists that you can access through our catalog. And I'm just going to do this little share switcheroo again, so bear with me here. See if this will go. So I'm going to stop this share. Oh, I'm going to have to go there. That's okay. Oh, it did go. Okay. So on our catalog, we have created these topic lists by common legal issue. So far we have 6: adoption and guardianship, divorce and custody, employment law for workers, small claims, landlord-tenant law for landlords, and landlord-tenant law for tenants. So if you are having an issue and you're not sure where to start, this is a really great place to start. I'm just going to go into the landlord-tenant law for tenants. What we do is we populate these lists with any websites, organizations, books that we might own in the library, or online resources that we have access to that might help. Excuse me. So it's not just limited to DPL resources, but it also contains a lot of DPL resources that might be useful. This is a great place to come if you've got a legal issue and you're not sure where to start. This is way better than just going out and Googling it, because you're going to be sure that you're getting authoritative resources that are specific to Oregon law. And that's something that you always want to be careful about, because if you're finding things for Idaho or Guam, those things aren't going to be relevant because Oregon has its own legal system that is completely different from any other states. Or if it's a federal issue, resources for the 9th district are going to be completely irrelevant for any of the other districts, because each of the federal districts also has its own system where legal authority doesn't apply to the other districts. So that jurisdiction is really important. So that's where these topic lists are really helpful, because we have vetted the information and we know that they apply to our state's law. And I'm going to show you how to get there because it's a little tricky. So I'm going to go back to the first page of our website. From here, we're going to go to books, movies, music, and then catalog. Once you're in the catalog, the two easiest ways to find this are to do a user search for DPL Law Library, all one word. And then you're going to see anything that we have created. The other way you can find it is if you change the search filter to list. You can do a search for DPL Law Library with the spaces, but you want to make sure it's in quotation marks. And then you'll see that screen that I originally brought up. And if you have any questions, I'm going to tell you how to contact us in a moment. So I'm going to stop share. I'm going to go back to my presentation. Let's see if I can get the right one up.
That's the one.
Perfect. The other thing that we do offer is we write a law library newsletter. It's called Law Library Briefs, and it goes out 3 times a year. We use this to communicate any changes to our services or programs, along with updates about county, state, and federal legal resources or, information that is relevant to our community. If you'd like to subscribe, you can go to our website, click on About, and then Newsletters, and then you're going to click on Sign Up for Email Newsletters. You'll see a list of all of the newsletters that DPL produces, and you might be surprised there are 12. I hold up 2, but I can't do that. There's 12, which is a lot. The Law Library also offers programming to support our community's legal needs. So first of all, we host legal presentations by local lawyers on topics such as family law, estate law, and landlord-tenant law. We actually just had a landlord-tenant law presentation last night. We've been doing these through Zoom. We learned how to use Zoom during the pandemic, and we're continuing to use that resource because we can record the presentations and then share them on DPL's YouTube page. So DPL has a YouTube site. If you go to YouTube, search for Deschutes Public Library, click on playlists, you will see a law and legal playlist, and all of the law library recordings are kept there. The landlord-tenant law presentation we did last night should be up in probably sometime mid next week. There is one there now, just know that is an older one. So wait for that new one to go up. As a community librarian, I spend a lot of my time out in the county. And so what I do is I offer a program called Law Library Office Hours, where once a month, I have set days and times in a different city in the county. So on the first Thursday of the month, currently, I'm going to Lapine and Sun River. The second Thursday of the month, I'm going to Sisters and Redmond. The third Thursday of the month, I'm at our East Bend location, and you can usually find me at our downtown Bend location on Tuesdays. For sure, I'll be there. So again, I'm not a lawyer. I can't give you legal advice, but I am able to help you access our resources and find the information, organizations, and resources that might help you move forward in your case or get some answers for your situation. To find out where and when I'm going to be there exactly, you can go to our website, again, deschuteslibrary.org, and go to our public calendar. That calendar is pretty big and busy, so the easiest thing to do is to do a search for Law Library, and then that will just show you all of the Law Library office hours around the district. And then, of course, our most well-known program is Lawyer in the Library. This program was created by the Deschutes County Access to Justice Committee and is a joint effort between the library and the Deschutes County Bar Association. It started in late, I'm blanking, it's either 2016 or 2017, as a weekly program, providing a free half-hour consultation with a civil law lawyer. Note that we are not able to help with criminal law questions. Shortly after the pandemic shut down our buildings, we moved that program online, and we continue to host those consultations virtually today. We did lose a lot of our volunteer attorneys over the pandemic, and for the past year, we have only been able to support family law questions, those that are specific to divorce and custody, and we've had to reduce frequency of the program to just the first and third Wednesdays of the month. The good news is the Bar and the Access to Justice Committee have just started to recruit new volunteer attorneys for this program. They're going to do a big push here in a couple of months, and we're hoping to have that program back to full capacity as soon as possible. Where you can find out what's happening with that program is on our Lawyer in the Library page on our website. If you go to deschuteslibrary.org and then click on services, we have a full page with more information about that program and the next available dates. We do not have online registration for that program. You do need to contact us, and I'm going to show you how to do that next. So the Law Library does have its own email and phone number that are listed here. So if you are interested in any of our programs, feel free to reach out. Again, that BiblioCommons account is DPL Law Library, and you can see the link to our webpage there, which I just gave you a whole lot of information. So if you have not fully retained it all, remember our legal resources page on our website is kind of like our cheat sheet for all of our programs and resources. And then if you can't find what you're looking for, please feel free to reach out. We are here to help you with your legal information needs. That is it. That's what I have.
Thank you, Jenny. This is an incredible amount of information and a truly incredible resource that we are able to offer. So thank you for kind of steering that ship. I know it must be a lot.
It can be a lot.
It's wonderful, though, to know that when you do have questions about really important, oftentimes scary or nerve-wracking issues, that there's somebody to help, and the library wants to be that someone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad for the opportunity to share more about what we do and what we offer, because I think a lot of people are surprised when they find out.
Definitely. So you kind of went over this a little in your presentation, but you mentioned that there are some kind of questions that you get asked a lot. You know, how do I do this? How do I handle this? So if you get another question that comes up more frequently, how do you decide whether or not you'll create a list of resources around something? Who really makes those decisions?
Yeah, well, so it's myself and my two public service specialists. So we have a law library team, and we're the ones who field the law library phone and email. And so, you know, we're the ones who are hearing all of these questions. And when you've heard something, you know, a couple of times, what will happen is we'll compile resources to share with that customer. And, you know, once it's happened a couple of times, if we're sort of sending out that same resources, it's like, okay, this is time for a list. What we'd really like to do is make our web page and use the catalog, those topic lists, as a way to make it more of a self-service resource for people, so they don't necessarily have to wait for a call back or an email back, but maybe they'll be able to just go in and say, you know, oh, I have a question about, landlord-tenant law. Oh, look, here's a list, and here are some resources that I can look at now and actually maybe get my question answered. So if it's a Sunday night and you've just had a discussion with your landlord and things aren't going well and you're not sure what your options are, you don't have to wait for the library to be open again on Monday morning. You can just find that information, hopefully find something that's useful to you.
Absolutely. That's a great point, that you can access all of these detailed resources 24/7, even though the library isn't open 24/7.
Yeah, exactly.
So what about people who might not have access to computers or internet through their own resources? How do we make an appointment with you to come into the library to get these questions answered?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you can always use the contacts that I put up, the law library phone and email, but we also do have a service on our website called Book a Librarian. So if you wanted help using, one of those big legal databases like Lexis or Westlaw, because they're complex. You can use that Book a Librarian form as well for your legal information needs. And that form comes to all the librarians, but anything that's legal, I'm going to pick up.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So what about resources offered in Spanish? Do you have resources, legal resources? How do we access those in different languages?
Yeah, that's a really tricky one. I was actually just speaking with one of my law librarian colleagues today. There are not a lot of American legal resources in Spanish. And the reason is simply the act of translating a statute or a form can be considered giving legal advice, because that translator is making an interpretation or a choice of what a certain word means. So it's really parsing hairs. It gets really tricky. So it's something that we struggle with. We do have a few books in our collection that are general, Spanish legal dictionaries or, Spanish for legal professionals. But there are not a lot of like, oh, here are the Oregon revised statutes in Spanish. That just doesn't exist. What we do have, we are able to offer interpreter services for our Lawyer in the Library program. So if somebody is a Spanish speaker, needs to consult with a lawyer, they can request an interpreter for that program. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
So you used a word there. You said revised. How often, for instance, the Oregon tenant law program that you just mentioned, you said that if we were to go to the website now, we would see an older version of that law. How often in general are these laws updated?
Yeah, well, so the Oregon legislature meets every 2 years and new statutes come out. It's always tricky, and this is a tricky thing when you're doing your legal research as well. This isn't a legal research class. We should do a legal research training, or I should. So I don't want to get too deep into this, but just because there's a statute on the books doesn't mean that it is still valid. Just because you find case law doesn't mean that it's still valid, because there could be a higher court that overturns a statute, but that statute isn't necessarily taken off the books, right? So I had a question a few years ago during one of the election cycles. Oregon has a law in its book that says that funding for Oregon political campaigns cannot come from outside of the state. And there were some super PACs that were funneling money into one of the campaigns. So somebody was like, hey, but there's this law. How are they doing that? Well, what had happened was Oregon had that law, and a couple of other states had a similar law that were challenged as a group. And it was taken to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ruled that those laws were unconstitutional. They went against free speech. So that law is still listed in Oregon statutes. It hasn't been removed, but a higher court has said, no, this law isn't valid. So this is where legal research can get really tricky, because just because something's in, codified doesn't mean that it's still valid. And then what we've seen recently with, you know, the overturning of Roe versus Wade, there were a lot of states that had laws on the books that Roe versus Wade had made invalid. And as soon as Roe versus Wade was overturned, those laws became valid again. So that's a good example, a more recent example of how that can happen. And I'm sorry, I've gotten too deep. I forgot what your original question was.
No, that's great. My original question was, how often do these things get overturned?
And then, so the state legislature meets every 2 years. And so, you know, every 2 years we'll have a new set. But then sometimes there are also special sessions in the off year, and laws will be promulgated then as well. So it's constant. And this is where, you know, if somebody comes in and they ask us what is the law on, they just want us to find them a statute. The law just doesn't work that way. That's a good example of why it doesn't work that way.
And that's a great example of why it's so helpful to have librarians such as yourself and these huge access to resources, so that you're not alone as you wade through all the crazy that can happen when you're looking at.
And this is where actually it's a really good example of where the secondary materials become so important, because when you're starting your legal research, it's almost impossible to just go out and try and find all of the state, federal statutes, regulations, and case law that might apply. The easier thing to do is to find somebody who's written a really good article or book about that area of law. This is what lawyers do, right? So let's follow their example. You know, find that secondary resource that's going to explain it. And what it will do is it will cite back to those primary sources of law that may apply, and case law that may apply to your situation. So that's the way you want to start. Don't start with the primary sources. Always start with the secondary. It's like doing a Wikipedia search before you start your research paper, right?
That's great. And, you know, really the best place to start is through the library.
Yes, because we have those resources.
We do. And we have the people who are willing to help.
Yes.
Great. Jenny, thank you so much for taking the time tonight to talk to us about this really important and really big topic. You condensed a lot of information into just a couple quick slides. So thank you for that. And thank you for providing your contact information too. Don't forget, you can reach out to us through the library's website, through Book a Librarian, through the law library email. Call us, come in. We are here and eager to help you. So anytime you need it, just give us a ring and we will be there.
Yeah.
Let's see. How do you ascertain that you have the real information? This is a question that came in through the Q&A.
Yeah, well, and this is the tricky thing with the legal research. And, you know, my understanding from the guides I've written on legal research, and I will just mention at this point, we do have a really great book on legal research in Oregon, written by an Oregon State Bar lawyer. What most lawyers say is once your research starts to become circular, so once you start seeing the same resources over and over, or the same citations, once you're not seeing anything new, but you're sort of seeing those same citations you've been seeing over and over, that's when you kind of are starting to get that clue that you've exhausted what's available. But that it might take you a while to get there. This is, you know, for all the types of research I've done in my life as a student and in my career as a professional researcher, nothing is like legal research. It really makes you understand why lawyers make so much money. It is hard.
That's a great question and a great answer. So once you kind of have seen the same information pop up, that's how you know that you may have exhausted those options. Yeah. Perfect. Great. Okay. Well, For all other questions, please feel free to contact us at the library. This has been Jenny Pedersen, the law librarian, and this is just one of the many free presentations that we have available on the Deschutes Public Library YouTube page. We invite you to explore our YouTube page for everything else that we have going on at the library, and check out your calendar and your event guide and your local listings for what else is coming to you at your library, maybe even tomorrow. We hope to see you then, and until then, you have a great night. Thanks, Joe, for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, Paige.
Thanks.